As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Albert Anastasia, nicknamed the Mad Hatter or the Lord High Executioner, and for good reason. He was the leader of the notorious Murder Inc. crew, and back in the Prohibition era, their body count was said to be in the thousands. But on October 25th, 1957, the Lord High Executioner would meet his execution. Promising underboss to Anastasia was Carlo Gambino, who had ambitions of his own. He wanted to be boss, and after Vito Genovese made a move on Frank Costello's crown by putting a hit out, Albert Anastasia, a strong, trusted ally of Costello's, was next on the chopping block. In a barbershop at the Park Sheridan Hotel in Midtown Manhattan, two men wearing scarves walk in, raise their pistols, and unload on the unsuspecting mob boss. The shooter was said to be Joey Gallo, as Gallo would later boast about it by saying, "You could just call us the Barbershop Quartet." The death of Anastasia and Costello's eventual conceit into retirement made Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino heads of their family and sent shockwaves across New York. Joe Colombo, the Don who reveled in the limelight rather than staying in the shadows. A powerful boss out of Brooklyn, Joe didn't shy away from the light. He embraced it. As most other bosses looked on in disapproval, Joe took to the cameras and he spoke his mind, promoting Italian pride while calling out the FBI for discrimination. He started the Italian American Civil Rights League. They had over 50,000 members, some even celebrities, setting up protests and even going as far as suing the FBI. This wasn't sitting well with the other families. Joe was a problem, and Joe had to go. And so he did. On March 11, 1971, a shot rang out as Joe was approaching the podium to speak. The shot to his head didn't kill him, but the bullet paralyzed him, and ultimately he died from his injuries a few years later. And once again, the breadcrumbs led right back to Gallo.
Growing up, he kidnapped his own bosses. I don't know how he got away with that. You don't get away with that. You do that, you die. That's simple. When he went away to the can, he recruited black guys instead of his own kind. And when he got out, nobody knew what he was doing or who he was doing it with. We didn't know what the hell was going on. Nobody did. And if you don't like what he's doing and you say something, then you see what happens.
But you don't kill a boss in broad daylight and expect to get away with it. The Colombo family tracked down Gallo on his birthday at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy. And that was the end of Joey Gallo. Joe the Boss Masseria. Joe was considered to be one of the first boss of bosses. In the 1920s, Masseria had one of the top families in New York, after eventually taking it over from the Morello family, the first true New York-based mafia to derive from Sicily.
I have to fight. And what choice they give me? Every day a fight. But one man, one boss.
But Masseria's unwavering control of absolute power and his feud with rival boss Maranzano spelled the beginning of the end for Joe Masseria. On April 15, 1931, Joe the Boss Masseria was gunned down in a restaurant in Coney Island. Shot 4 times and once in the back of the head. The hit was orchestrated by Lucky Luciano. The shooters were said to be Bugsy Siegel, Vito Genovese, Albert Anastasia, and Joe Adonis. The new generation of gangsters had arrived. After the hit, Luciano sets his sights on Maranzano, sending a hit team to his office. They shot and stabbed Maranzano to death. Luciano then set up the Commission, what is now known as La Cosa Nostra, and the golden age of the Mafia had begun. Carmine Galante. He was quoted as once saying, "No one will ever kill me. They wouldn't dare." He would be wrong. Galante was running the Bonanno family in the 1970s. His feud with the Gambinos over drug trafficking in New York City was a war, with at least 8 Gambino family members getting clipped. The other families were alarmed at how brazen he was for trying to take over the drug market, not to mention not sharing any of the profits with the other families. Behind the scenes, Genovese boss Frank Thierry started petitioning the commission for the okay on the hit on Galante. It worked. Galante was to be executed by orders of the commission. On July 12, 1979, Galante was eating lunch on an open patio at Joe Maria's Italian-American restaurant in Bushwick, Brooklyn. Galante was dining with a Bonanno capo, Leonard Coppola, and restaurant owner/cousin Giuseppe Turano. So at 2:45 p.m., 3 men with ski masks walked through the restaurant and out toward the patio. With shotguns and pistols, the men gunned down Galante and the 2 other men. The message was clear. Anyone can be touched. Paul Castellano. Castellano was promoted to the boss of the Gambino family when Carlo Gambino died of natural causes in 1976. Some referred to him as the Howard Hughes of the mob because he was looked at as more of a businessman than a hoodlum. Castellano had control of the construction and concrete unions operating in New York City, and with the money he was making, he built himself a mansion in Staten Island. This rubbed some capos the wrong way, as they were struggling in their rackets and still had to kick up to Castellano, Gotti being one of them. Gotti felt Castellano wasn't built to be a real Don. Castellano also named his bodyguard as underboss when he took the reign, which was an odd move and a slight to some capos. And after Castellano had discussed breaking up Gotti's crew, the tension between the two only grew, until the night of December 16, 1985, when John Gotti, without the consent from the commission, put thoughts into action. A bold move, a move that would reshape the hierarchy and raise Gotti to be the #1 boss. Castellano was to have an arranged meeting in the early evening hours at Spark Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. And at 5:26 p.m., Paul Castellano pulls up to the restaurant with his driver/underboss Thomas Bilotti. A hit team parked just down the street waits for their moment. Multiple shots by the gunmen hit their targets. Both Castellano and Bilotti died at the scene. The unsanctioned hit on Castellano was considered one of the ballsiest moves in mob history, and the move paid off. 2 weeks after Castellano's murder, a meeting of capos in a Manhattan basement elected Gotti the new boss of the Gambino family, and at age 45, John Gotti, the Teflon Don, would be the new boss of bosses.